Hey everyone. If you've been with me these past few weeks, you know we've been walking through something together. We started by talking about living in the stuck, those places we settle into because they're familiar, even if they're holding us back. Then we moved into letting go, releasing the things we just can't carry anymore. From there, we dug into the lies we tell ourselves, the stories we create to survive, but that eventually keep us from truly living. And today, we're going to the next step. It's the step that's been the hardest for me, the one I've tried to avoid, the one I've locked in a box so far down that I convinced myself I'd lost the key. We're talking about forgiveness. And I'm not talking about the easy kind, the sorry I was late kind. I'm talking about the kind that feels impossible, the kind you can't imagine giving because you think it will mean saying what happened was okay, the kind you think you don't owe to someone who truly hurt you. For me, forgiveness means going back to a place I've spent my whole life trying to outrun. When I was a teenager, my stepfather, a drug addict, began crossing boundaries that no father figure should ever cross. He made comments about my body. He looked at me when I was in the shower. He touched me in ways no child should ever be touched. His own mother once told me he was in love with me and that it was unacceptable. I didn't even realize at first how wrong it all was. But when I finally did, when I finally put it into words in my journal, I got the courage to hand it to my mom. I will never forget that day. We sat at the kitchen table. She read it. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I had a feeling. I'm so sorry. I will leave him." But she didn't leave. A few weeks later, my mom collapsed in the shower. She was rushed to the hospital and diagnosed with leukemia. And she never left him. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't. At least I think. Throughout her illness, he played the role of the hero, the caretaker, the man who never left her side. But I knew the truth. And I sat there, losing my mom, while the man who had stolen so much from me took up space in her final moments. And here's the thing I really said out loud. I haven't just carried anger toward him. I've carried it toward my mom. Because even though she was sick, even though she loved me, she admitted she had a feeling about what he was doing to me. And she didn't stop it. I've also carried anger towards my real father, the man who could have protected me, who was traveling the world with the military and didn't know me, and toward family and friends who've since said, "We always thought something was off." So forgiveness, for me, isn't just about one person. It's about him, it's about my mom, it's about my real dad, it's about every single person who stood by, even if they didn't know the full truth, and let me live in a nightmare. Over the years, I've let a lot of that anger go. I've even let some people back into my life. But there's still a part of me that clings to resentment, and it's heavy. That's why today's episode isn't just a story. It's a journey I'm inviting you on, a journey where maybe together we can start loosening our grip on the anger that's been holding us hostage for far too long. And because I believe this story has the power to make an impact, to help someone who thinks they're alone, who thinks no one could possibly understand, I'm pouring it all out here. And maybe your story looks different. Maybe it's verbal abuse, betrayal at work, being bullied, or someone who tore down your confidence. We've all faced moments where forgiveness feels impossible. This is about those moments. We're doing something a little different today. Instead of my usual 2 lessons, we're going to have 3. 3 lessons that I hope will walk you through not just my path toward forgiveness, but maybe help light yours too. Let's start with lesson number 1. Forgiveness is not approval. Here's what I need you to know right away. Forgiving someone doesn't mean you're saying what they did was okay. It doesn't mean you're letting them off the hook. It doesn't mean they deserve your forgiveness. It took me a really long time to understand all of that. But whether it's forgiving a parent, a boss who took credit for your work, a friend who betrayed you, or someone who made you feel small, the principle is the same. For a long time, I believed that if I forgave my stepfather, I would somehow erase what happened. Like it would rewrite the story and make it seem smaller, less horrific, less damaging. And I wasn't willing to do that. I still am not willing to do that. Because what he did to me was wrong. It was abuse. It was a theft of my trust, my sense of safety, and my voice. But here's what I've learned. Forgiveness isn't about releasing them from the weight of what they've done. It's about releasing you from the grip of that weight. For years, my anger toward him was a constant hum in the background of my life. I never confronted him. I just walked away, silently. I stopped returning calls. At first, I'd still show up at family events, but I'd completely shut down around him. And then eventually, I just stopped going altogether. I cut it off cold. People who didn't know the truth thought it was just because I was grieving my mom. Little did they know. Then I started therapy. It was like someone slowly turned the lights on in a room I'd been sitting in for years. I began to see how much of my life this had seeped into, my intimacy issues, my trust issues, my confidence issues. I got mad, I got sad, I got angry, and then I'd run away and I'd hide from it all again. Little by little, I started telling people, just a few, but only a handful truly cared, truly acknowledged it, or what I felt like believed me. That's the thing about telling your truth. You think the hardest part is saying it out loud, but sometimes the hardest part is how people respond afterward. Honestly, it wasn't until I met my current husband and his family that I realized love and happiness were still possible. They acknowledged what was wrong. They stood with me. They protected me. And later, when I found my faith, that's when forgiveness even became a conversation in my heart. Because here's the truth. Left to my own strength, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be telling this story. I wouldn't be trying to forgive. The only reason I'm here now is because God put it on my heart. But here's the thing about forgiveness. Sometimes it's not just the person who hurt you that you have to forgive. Sometimes it's the people who weren't there when you needed them the most. The people who could have stepped in but didn't. The ones who had a feeling something was wrong but stayed silent. And that's a whole different layer of hard. Which leads me to lesson number 2. Forgiving the absent and the silent. There's my mom. My person, my best friend, my true ride or die. She was my rock, my foundation, the woman who would move mountains for me. But how could she let me down in something so impactful? She knew me, my heart, my fears, my quirks, and still she hid, she ignored, she looked away. I will never understand why. This is the woman who read my journal at the kitchen table, cried, and said, I had a feeling, I'm so sorry, I will leave him. And then she didn't. I know she was sick. I know leukemia took over her body. I know she loved me. But she also knew, and she did nothing. And honestly, I think she's the one who let me down the most. She's not here to talk about it, and that might be the hardest part, knowing I'll never get to ask her why. Then, moments before she passed, she held my hand, looked me in the eyes, and made me promise that I'd take care of him, that I'd always be there for him. Like, what? I can still feel that moment, the shock, the mix of grief and just complete disbelief. Then there's my real dad, the man who could have been the shield I needed. But he was halfway around the world in the military, and for so long I was furious at him for not being there. But through forgiveness, my dad and I have rebuilt a relationship that I never thought we'd have, and I'm so incredibly grateful for it. And it's not just my parents. Over the years, family and friends have said, we always thought something was off. People who had a feeling but stayed silent. And maybe for you, it wasn't family. Maybe it was a coworker who saw you being disrespected and said nothing, a teammate who didn't stand up for you, or a friend who disappeared in your hardest season. Part of why I didn't tell many people for so long was because I didn't want to hurt my little brother. He was young, and my stepfather was his real father. I never wanted to damage their relationship or make him choose. Holding that in for years took so much out of me. Eventually, I realized I had to let it go for my own healing. My brother and I are so close, and while it can be hard knowing he has a relationship with his father, I completely respect that it's his choice. Some people are no longer in my life, and that is absolutely for the best. Others, I've been able to clear the air with, even if I didn't agree with their choices. And then, there are those who walked away from him and chose me. I never wanted to ask people to choose, but for those who did, thank you. And the ones I've chosen since, well, they're my family for life. Which leads me to lesson number 3. Choosing who gets to be around you. As I've gotten older, I've realized something important. You get to choose your circle. I've even had people, bullies, who went out of their way to tear me down. And I've chosen to forgive them. In some cases, I've gone as far as asking God to bless them, genuinely hoping they'd find peace. Because forgiveness isn't about giving them a free pass, it's about freeing me. And it's also meant making hard calls when it comes to the people I'm closest to. When I was married to my ex-husband, he knew what my stepfather had done to me. And yet, at my grandmother's funeral, he sat at the table with my stepfather. I sat alone, and in the middle of that day, my stepfather walked up to me and said, we should talk about what happened in our relationship. The audacity in that moment of grief still blows my mind. My ex didn't step in. That kind of silence, it cuts deep. Years later, when I met my now husband, it was different. The first time he came face to face with my stepfather at my brother's graduation, he looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, I cannot and will not shake your hand." Then he stepped between us like a shield. When we told his family, they didn't brush it off or make excuses. They told me how proud they were of their son for protecting me. That's when I knew I was falling in love, but I also realized what true love really was: protection. And maybe your story isn't as intense as mine. Maybe your boundaries are about toxic friendships, draining family relationships, a workplace that's worn you down, or even just people who don't bring out the best in you. But here's what I've learned. Forgiveness isn't only for the big, life-altering betrayals. It's for every corner of life. It's forgiving yourself for falling off track on a goal, forgiving yourself for skipping the workout you swore you do, forgiving yourself for not showing up as your best self every single day. It's giving grace when you lose your patience with your kids, when you forget to call a friend back, or when you drop the ball on something important. But if you can't practice forgiveness in the small, everyday moments, it becomes so much harder to find it in the great big ones. Forgiveness is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets, and the better you feel. And that strength will serve you no matter what life throws your way. This leads me to our power move for the week. This week, I want you to choose one area of your life where you can take a step toward forgiveness. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't mean what happened was okay. Maybe it's someone who hurt you. Maybe it's someone who stayed silent. Maybe it's yourself. And also what I've learned is through forgiveness, it can be silent. It can be through prayer. It can be through meditation. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to confront. And forgiveness doesn't mean you have to do anything to the person who hurt you. It's simply choosing to forgive and moving forward. But I want you to write it down. Pray about it. Meditate on it. The point isn't to erase the pain. It's to loosen its grip on you. So let's move to the what's been fueling me lately section. Honestly, my vulnerability. For so long, I carried this story so quietly. I didn't want to make people uncomfortable. I didn't want to hurt my brother. I didn't want to hurt people around me. I didn't want to be seen as a victim. But choosing to be open has been my greatest source of strength. It's allowed me to heal, to connect, and to create space for others to tell their truths. And thank you, truly, for allowing me to be this real and raw. That's what Fit Fuel Female is about. Before I go, I again want to thank you. I have been so overwhelmed lately with gratitude for those of you who have been showing up, sending messages, sharing your stories, binging these episodes. I see you and my heart is full. Y'all, forgiveness is hard, but the hardest part is taking the first step. And the more I forgive, the more I heal. That's it for today. Stay fit, stay fueled, and I cannot wait to see you next time.